The following presents an overview of the main stem features of the Mississippi River and Tributaries project and the potential consequences if lower Mississippi River flows reached near project flood levels at the current stage of project completion. Animation and file footage are used to illustrate the effects of flooding. The lower Mississippi Valley is the location of one of the most unique geological and hydrological settings on Earth. The Father of Waters passes through a 35,000 square mile alluvial valley that is nearly as large as the state of Indiana. For nearly 300 years, earthen flood control structures called levees have been built in the valley to protect businesses, homes, and farms from destructive overflows. The initial efforts were intermittent and marginally successful. A pall of dread and fear hung over the valley as the Mississippi River frequently overtopped and breached these primitive works, taking lives and imposing despair. For many years, levee boards and other local interests attempted to abate flooding by raising and extending the line of protection. The creation of the Mississippi River Commission in 1879 launched a partnership between federal, state, and local interests to prevent destructive floods. Nevertheless, the river remained a menace. Flood control efforts were unable to safely pass massive flows through the lower Mississippi Valley. In the 1882 flood, 284 crevasses with a combined length of 56.1 miles spread devastation throughout the valley as the river remained out of its banks for 90 days. A cluster of floods in 1912, 1913, and 1916 caused greater investments in federal flood control, and during the next decade, levees were raised and strengthened. But the 1927 flood unleashed a holocaust as the river rampaged across 26,000 square miles. The valley was transformed into a surreal, watery landscape as 500,000 people were driven from their homes. The river broke through the levees at 13 locations, bearing witness that a flood control system is no stronger than its weakest links. As a result of the 1927 flood, a comprehensive flood control system was formulated to provide adequate protection in the lower valley. The 1928 Flood Control Act created the vast, comprehensive Mississippi River and Tributaries Project, or MR&T, a blend of flood control and channel stabilization structures designed to protect the Mississippi Valley from inundation and develop a reliable navigation channel. Thereafter, construction of the protective works would be designed for a project flood, the greatest flood having a reasonable probability of occurring. In 1993, the rainfall that occurred in the Missouri and upper Mississippi basins, if combined with similar rainfall over the Ohio basin, would have produced discharges in the lower valley approaching project flood conditions. The still incomplete MR&T includes several project elements. Channel stabilization features such as dikes, revetment, and dredging ensure adequate navigation channels and prevent the river from meandering. Levees and flood walls are designed to safely confine project flood flows and thereby protect communities, homes, and farms. Floodways divert excess flows to reduce stages and the height of levees required to pass flood flows. Backwater areas temporarily store excess flood water and reduce necessary levee heights. Of the MR&T features, only the floodways are finished. Construction of channel stabilization works are nearing completion. Of the some 2,059 miles of levees on the Mississippi and the Chapalaya rivers, 354 miles are deficient in grade and or section. 147 miles of berms are needed to prevent underseepage. The levees provide a continuous line of protection from the upper reaches of the MR&T near Cape Girardeau, Missouri, to the Gulf of Mexico. While the levees increase stages, they reduce the area flooded to a small percentage of the total floodplain and increase the hydraulic gradient, forcing the excess water more rapidly to the Gulf. The system eliminates Mississippi River flood water on large urban areas, small towns, and extensive agricultural areas. Portions of cities such as Memphis, Tennessee, and Baton Rouge, Louisiana, and all of New Orleans are protected from Mississippi River flooding by the Mississippi River and Tributaries Project. Even though the MR&T remains incomplete, no main stem levee has breached or overtopped on the lower Mississippi River since 1927, despite assaults by great floods in 1937, 1950, 1973, 1983, and 1993. Consequently, there is an inclination to become complacent, to conclude that the valley is no longer at risk. What would happen if the project flood, or one almost as large, occurred with the project still incomplete? The following scenarios portray some of the probable consequences of the river's rage. As above normal rainfall increases river discharges to the current capacity of the system, frantic emergency efforts are taken to raise the levees with sandbags, mud boxes, and every means possible. Underseepage causes sand boils to develop on the landside toes of the levees along the reaches where construction of berms are incomplete. One vulnerable reach is the Bird's Point to Commerce levee, the most upstream portion of the main stem MR&T levee system. At present, a reach of the levee is subject to severe underseepage and is in need of additional berms to prevent structural failure. The levee protects a large area of southeast Missouri and northeast Arkansas from flooding by the Mississippi River. This protected area consists of rich agricultural lands, urban areas, and major infrastructure links, and includes the cities of New Madrid, Sikeston, Charleston, East Prairie, Wyatt, Dealstadt, Bertrand, and other small communities. As the river stage rises toward project flood stage, underseepage increases and flow of water underneath the levee undermines the levee structure. The river ultimately breaks through the levee, rapidly eroding a large section of the earthen structure. Waters spread rapidly across the open, now unprotected areas. Local drainage systems and low areas are filled by the floodwaters. 24 hours later, the floodwaters spread southward as far as the community of Dealstadt. 70 square miles of lands are flooded, along with disruption of transportation facilities. Day 2, the floodwaters reach I-57, affecting East Sikeston, Charleston, Bertrand, and other communities. Now 170 square miles are flooded with depths of up to 12 feet in low areas. Day 3, flood waters reach the St. John's Bayou area, affecting East Prairie and adjacent communities. Due to the topography of this area and the existing levee system, flood waters are confined here until all storage areas are filled. Day 5, all storage areas are filled, thereby forcing the flood waters to continue southward into the city of New Madrid, adjacent communities, and portions of the St. Francis River Basin. If favorable conditions exist, a man-made breach in the levee system near St. John's Bayou may allow the floodwaters to re-enter the Mississippi River. This could prevent the floodwaters from inundating New Madrid and the St. Francis River Basin. In the event a man-made breach is not possible or successful, the city of New Madrid and a large area of the St. Francis Basin extending 150 miles southward to the vicinity of Helena, Arkansas, would be flooded. As flows increase to 2.4 million cubic feet per second at Vicksburg, Mississippi, 500,000 cubic feet per second less than the project flood flow and about 20% greater than the 1973 flood, a deficient section of levee just above Lake Providence, Louisiana, overtops and washes out. A 20-foot wall of water is unleashed upon the adjacent countryside. The crevasse widens to 3,000 feet, increasing the size of the torrent. Within hours, Lake Providence is under 8 feet of water. Tallulah, Louisiana, 35 miles below the crevasse, is flooded within 30 hours, and the vital east-west Interstate 20 is cut. Relentlessly, the brown tide of devastation moves west and south down the Boeuf and Tensas basins, claiming homes and farms, as well as devastating the Tensas River National Wildlife Refuge and Big Lake Wildlife Management Area, a 90,000-acre bottomland hardwood environmental treasure with abundant wildlife. Much of the wildlife drowns or starves during the prolonged flood event. Within 4 to 5 days, the flood wave engulfs communities such as Newellton, St. Joseph, and Winsboro. Homes have 4 feet of water in them, and Highway 15 is covered by some 4 to 6 feet. The floodwaters pass around a natural barrier called Macon Ridge, some 40 miles west of the Mississippi, creating backwater flooding on the Ouachita River, and eventually reaching the Monroe, Louisiana area, some 70 miles west of the Mississippi River. The area of devastation is about 100 miles wide. Further south, the towns of Jonesville, Faraday, and Vidalia, already victimized by backwater flooding, experience flooding at rooftop levels due to added flows from the Lake Providence crevasse. The flood moves through the Atchafalaya Basin, finally discharging into the Gulf of Mexico. The toll of nature's rage across 1.8 million acres in Louisiana is monumental as flooding persists for 100 days. The lives and livelihood of 74,000 people severely disrupted, 25,000 homes damaged or destroyed, 1,100 miles of roads severed and many bridges damaged, disruption to power, communications, and fuel distribution systems, contamination of potable water supplies, and interruption of food deliveries. Healthcare facilities and emergency services disrupted. Damages approach several $billions, and the disruption to the regional economy lingers for years. The toll in human suffering is immeasurable. The foregoing grim scenario could also occur at deficient levees on the east bank of the Mississippi. A break in the levee near Mayersville, Mississippi would impact 79,000 people and 25,000 homes in the Mississippi Delta. The estimated damages would exceed $3 billion. Until the weak links in the levee system are raised and strengthened to necessary levels, the valley remains vulnerable and at risk. The catastrophe described above is a likely scenario if a flood near the magnitude of the project flood occurs prior to the completion of this needed work. The MR&T system has proven its value to the nation. The project has prevented $174.9 billion in flood damages for an investment of $9.3 billion. As of 1995, the estimated cost of completing construction of the project is $4.8 billion. Local levee and drainage districts continue to support construction, operation, and maintenance of this system with an annual investment totaling approximately $77,400,000. The Mississippi River carries 500 million tons of waterborne commerce annually and serves as the linchpin of the nation's inland navigation system. The Mississippi River Commission and its allies are resolved to complete the Mississippi River and Tributaries project, which fulfills 3 centuries of hope, expectation, and effort.